well, of course, it introduced me to a whole, not, before that, I mean, Trim was really foreign territory, but I suppose Cool was foreign territory, as was Rathmaline. I mean, we were so small-minded, but yes, you met new people in Trim, and because in Trim, apart from those from the town, you had an influx from Kildalkey, from Bective, Kilmessan, yeah, and all on bikes, and yes, it opened up. There were new people. Remember Polly Gleason, and you had the desks for two, a single unit for two with inkwells. Though I don't think we were using inkwells then.
The bikes, you mentioned the bikes. Do you want to tell us about your career with bikes, both to school and other functions?
Bikes. Everything was bikes then. In Summerhill, you had, the two photos that I printed the other day that I had, negatives from the 50s, and there is one car at the end of what was Hannah's, but at that time, there were only a handful who owned cars, and they certainly wouldn't risk parking them on the road. They were always taken inside. In Summerhill, you had Phyllis Gogarty, Hannah's, I can't remember, but there was bikes everywhere. That was the main mode of transport, and yes, so cycling to Trim. When you come to think of it, and Bremount was always the big obstacle, and of course the bikes in those days, they didn't have, there weren't gear changes or anything like that, and and yet, now I can remember it would be during the school, that period, going to the cinema with Tom Flynn, both of his own bikes. The cinema was the Royal Cinema, was what is the Trim Hardware now, that building. And coming home, at Bremount, my bicycle chain broke, so that was it. And Tom Flynn, he must have been pretty tough, but just with his arm from my shoulder, he dragged me all the way back. That was something. Then we had, in Dagenham, the parish priest was Father Moore, who's the most cantankerous man you could imagine. And there was always a drama of some kind. Well, I remember on a particular occasion, and of course in those days, you would never criticise the clergy, and the confessional was sacrosanct. You would never mention a thing. And all those years later, I mean more recently, when I met Noel Austin, and Father Moore came up, and we realised we both had a similar experience. And I went to confession with Father Moore, really burdened, because I'd had impure thoughts, and he demanded to know the number, and because each of those was a mortal sin that deserved hell for all eternity. If he gave me absolution, he would take the burden onto his shoulders. So he pressed and pressed. I couldn't remember the number. And at the top of his voice, he yelled, "Well, get out and examine your conscience." And he slammed the thing. And I go in, of course, all eyes are on me. And what terrible thing had I done? And I regret to this day that I didn't have the guts to keep going, but I went back and made up a number. And but that was the last time. I think many had that of the young, so we're all teenagers, had the same experience. So on Saturday nights there used to be an exodus into Trim, where you got an easier confession. So it was bikes to it, and a bit more sympathy, it seems. But Father Moore was the one to avoid. And
there was some. You weren't the only one to have that experience. Was there somebody else who?
oh, no, Lawson's was exactly the same.
But
exactly the same.
There was somebody else again who was asked to shout out loud what their...
Oh God, yes, that was with Father Carty. We had a curate set up with Father Moore, who was very, very deaf. And confession, you'd hear him say, "Speak up!" And I was on one side, poor Barney Clark, who wasn't the full shilling, he was some years younger. "Speak up, speak up." And you hear Barney yell out, "Well, I stole sugar and I let out a big curse." And then, of course, the way we were taught then, or the way we were frightened, all these were terrible sins, and you had to confess them. Oh dear. So that was Daniel.
You went further afield on the bikes though, not just to school or to Dangan, you went...
Oh God, we went...
You went to Dublin on occasion?
Well, I went to... that was, again, the answer from the dad was no. I wasn't going to have permission to do something daft like that. Anyway, I wanted to see, I was very interested in the cinema, and I had a bike which was canary yellow in there. You couldn't miss it. And I was delayed, and then I'm going for messages or something, but I actually cycled to Dublin and plunked my bike down outside the Savoy Cinema on O'Connell Street. It never occurred to me that there might be any risk, and there wasn't. It was there when I came out. Except I managed to get a puncture coming back just near Dunboyne, and to get help, the first house, I remember it was on the left-hand side, going to Summerhill, and it happened to be the sergeant, and who was very kind, and they mended the puncture for me. But before that happened, while I was wheeling the bike, Hannah's car passed, and I was never, the one I missed out was Donny Hannah. Donny Hannah, as far as I was concerned, was the school bully, and we never got on, but it graved them, it made them day. I was walking home from Dunboyne with a bicycle so that was, the bikes were the mainstay.
Drama, there was a drama class or drama
yes.
group.
Something coming back to Father Moore.
Right.
I think I was picking things out on the piano when I was about 8 years old, because I can even remember Dad showing me one tune, but I didn't have a proper music lesson till I was 13 or 14 maybe. And poor Miss McKittrick, who was the junior teacher, part of her contract was that she had charge of the choir and the organ. Now, Miss McKittrick I don't know that she had even elementary knowledge. I think I can thank her for a lot in the classroom because she used to work with a tuning fork, and I remember how she taught us to pitch. She taught us a lot of, quite a few traditional tunes, but it was agony for her to have to go to the organ loft. And in those years, and probably for many years, there was a leak in the bellows, and the organ had to be pumped manually from the back, and that usually took two girls, you know, and because there was a leak, it would run out and you get, you know, full stop. But the contract that Miss McKittrick had was with Father Moore was in charge of all, and she was obliged to come back. She was from Carrickmacross, so she couldn't have her Christmas. She had to come back to Summerhill for midnight mass, and at Easter same thing, and for the holy days, the 15th of August. And at a point I thought, well, I can do better than she is. And I suggested, Meg, can I help out? And she was absolutely delighted. And for the first time in all the years she was in Summerhill, she was able to have her Christmas and Easter, and I could play for the so-called choir, which was absolutely dismal because it was purely the school. Then one day I think I probably got a bit cocky to fool myself, and there was benediction after Mass, and the Tantum Ergo. Now there came the point, and I thought, have I played one verse or two? And I listened for the choir, and they listened for me, and nothing happened, and I put amen to it. And there was a silence that you could cut. And then Father Moore, at the top of his voice, decided to recite the second verse. So he bawled out, Jenny Tory, Jenny Toquay, and I remember coming down the stairs from George Young, who was the sacristan, and he said, why didn't you play the second verse? Well, I don't know. My mind was on other things. But I'm afraid that was the end of my experience as organist, for what it was worth, in Summerhill, and it was the end of poor Miss McKittrick having relief from that. She had to come back and do the...
You had the distinction connected with that of spending some time in the convent, which wouldn't be typical of boys at that time.
Oh no, because I was severely asthmatic, I was excused from the sports field, and every Thursday was it was football in the afternoon, and so I was excused, and I particularly, had a nagging thing, because people used to say, why don't you have proper lessons? Well, that's what happened. And I remember being told, you make sure you ask for Mother Aquin, because she's a lovely nun. Sister Ignatius is very hard. And anyway, I asked for Mother Aquin, and I didn't know it, but I was talking to Sister Ignatius, so I was taken on. But that
was as a music teacher?
Yes. And the thing is, I was the prejudice, the bias that existed. I mean, every mother's daughter had to be taught the piano, whether they were musical or not, or whether it was even a remote possibility. But boys did not play the piano, they played the violin or the fiddle. And so I was going in, you know, Matt Gilson, and at the same time he had violin lessons there. There was another chap, but I was for piano lessons. So every Thursday, you know, I had to run the gauntlet. The girls in the convent just come out, and I had to cycle past Honestbill with sneering. Oh God! And yeah, there were an awful lot of sneers then. but it was. No, she was difficult. She wasn't a good teacher. She was very talented herself and made the bad mistake of feeling that everything that she could do easily must be something everyone else can do easily. And I wasn't a good sight reader, well, because I was playing by ear for years before and got... and those musicians who can play by ear tend to be less efficient at sight reading because they can rely on something else and not give I think that is general. But she was away, she was sick or something one week, and I decided to do a recital myself, and several of the girls who just came into the room. So I can remember the next week from Sister Ignatius, and it's always the same thing, like really severe. Good evening, Tom. Now, would you play the Swedish Rhapsody? You played it for the others, so I might as well hear it. And then I remember she said, well, perfect. And if you can do that, why can you not do the other? But God, she was a horror sometimes. I can remember once, good evening, Tom. I've been listening to you outside and there have been many mistakes, which shouldn't be the case. You're going to play it now without mistakes, or else you'll get this across the knuckles in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. And that was typical Sister Ignatius. But on the other hand, I didn't appreciate it for many years later. There was so much that she said to me that just went completely over my head. And, many years later, she was right, but she wasn't very good at communicating. But it came down to that. She was a brilliant sight reader. Anything that she'd never seen, and it was a performance. She was highly professional, but I can do it, so can everyone else, was the attitude. And why are you so slow? Well, that was then. I suppose trim was the big thing. But trim and the cinema was the cinema was the main entertainment. In Dublin.
Well, there were dances, weren't
there? Oh yeah. But in Dublin that was a regular thing. But in the 50s, well, in Summerhill, you had Kit Kelly, you had the Gold and Silver, and Dangan Hall, which of course is Hughes's now. That was the only outlet. Then you had the in Trim, in the town hall, St. Stephen's Day, St. Patrick's Day. You had probably about 4 or 5 times in the course of the year there would be a dance, and probably one of the growing number of bands, of Irish bands, of course 50s. A decade later, you had the show bands. It mushroomed into a huge thing, but dancing was very much that in the cinema were because television hadn't arrived, at least not in Ireland at that time. So radio was again very important, and the BBC Light programme, which later became BBC Two, was a top favourite. In that it had the comedians, it was light entertainment, but very popular, even for, and you had, on the Irish station, Radio Éireann as it was, you had the sponsored programmes at lunchtime, Denny's, and I always remember Walton's on Saturday, I think. And if you feel like singing, do sing an Irish song. Which, did you hear that, Tom? This is Aunt Lizzie. She disapproved of, how could anyone listen to the pop crap? In her world, you listened only Irish. In every category, that had to be the priority. But, yes, the radio was important. It was the only thing. I remember the first, again, this is 1950s, and there were 3 television sets in Summerhill at the very beginning. One was Dr. Buckley, the other was Shaw's, and the other was Niall Fagan, who was living in the village at that time. And the television then was a huge piece of furniture with a tiny screen, and in the early years that was all flickering. But I got I went to Niall Fagan's a few times, but yeah, it is just so primitive by best time. And the Radio Éireann, everything, the announcers, everyone involved with that, they were so self-conscious that and some of the gestures and it would be, if we could see it today, it would be terribly funny. The drama group in Dangan,
when was that set up?
Well, that was going when I was still in Dangan, so I think there'd always been, it was Mara Reynolds, Tim Mack, a lot of the other that I wouldn't really have known, and it would be dropped for maybe a couple of years and then stop. But there was always an interest locally in having a drama group. Kelly took over. It wasn't very popular, but nonetheless, we had some interesting things. At one point, I don't know how we managed this, but the idea was to do a play or do some concoction of entertainment in Dangan, and then it was offered to other parishes, to help their funds, and a lot of the places we went to, I can't even remember the names. There was Cadamstown, with Enfield once, but there were places off the beaten track. Kilmeston at one point. What's Cadamstown anyway? Is there?
Towards Enfield.
All right. No, I never quite knew, but that was we got a program together of 3 one-act plays, and then we were going on tour, and there was an incident probably every time something or other went wrong. Like there was supposed to be a settee. Remember, I had a scene with May McCardle, and it was a courting thing, and in wherever we were, no, they didn't have a settee, so they got the back seat of the car from somewhere and put a rug over it, and it was placed on something in the middle, and of course when we sat on it, it was like a seesaw, and it was, hilarious for the audience. But the big thing, Kelly thought I was being disruptive, so in the rehearsals, so I was official prompter, so I had to take a script and get out of the way. So one night again, where it happened, I just can't remember, but we had 3 plays, and Paddy Daly, who was in the third, after hours, was a guard. So he's in guard's uniform, and at some point his speech was slurred, and he came to the front of the stage, and Kathleen screamed out, "Hold him!" And the thing is, if somebody hadn't, he would have. And the long shot of that, he had food poisoning, and he collapsed, and without stopping to think, Kelly grabbed me, got the tunic off Paddy, said, "Get into this." He said, "You've been prompting, so you must know." So, the what do you call it? The guards had a cap into the whole thing. "Oh, I need a little more." So somebody who's supposed to be doing makeup and costumes for what they were worth, painted with thick mascara, a moustache, and yes, somewhere in the scene I had to kiss Carmen O'Reilly, and without none of the techniques I'd learned in later years, but it was full on. And the result was the moustache came off on her, which caused a lot of hilarity. But there was always something like this, and oh God, they've nothing to do with the drama, but Andy Sheridan had a red van, and I said there was so few with cars or anything else, but I'm sure Andy managed to squeeze about 10 into that, and I remember we called to someone in some house in Cool, and to pick up a girl, that as I say, his collection in the van, we were it's like sardines, but I know I was out of the van because I went with them into this house, and I don't know whose girlfriend or what, but this girl, she was ready for the dance, and there's an old lady in the corner, and as we were going out the door, she shouted, "And I hope you're wearing your scapulars," and which of course, that would be a prerequisite for going to
You had a particular honour and distinction, maybe, or a number of you had, representing the community in the drama experience to go to Killarney. And
I never worked out. It must have been in connection with drama, because out of the blue, we've got to get a youth section for Wynth and Atira to go to the conference in Killarney. Now, you can imagine, never been to Killarney, and how that is a huge journey. And anyway, I don't know whose was the loudest voice. It wouldn't have been mine in that case, because I probably felt well, the whole thing's a far-fetched idea, but we hired a car, and Noel Austin and Micheál Giles were the two that had license, and we set off for the day. Now that was an eye-opener for me.
And who else was there?
Oh, sorry, it was Noel and Micheál with the drivers, Paddy Austin, Seamus Hughes, myself. And when we eventually got to Kerry, and I mean, it was all a new experience, but there were literally dozens of donkey-drawn, what were these cars? But all with milk churns going to the creameries. A whole different world altogether. We went to the conference centre, and I think quickly decided it wasn't for us, that we'd derive more out of doing some touring and discovering what our neighbours in Kerry. And not long, we were enjoying the scenery, and then two girls further on the road were thumbing a lift. Well, there are 5 in the car already, but the idea, could we help them get to the youth hostel? It's only a bit further away. Well, I know there was a pause, probably the driver needed, but I remember Paddy Austin disappeared behind there was a grove of laurels, and we waited, and then the two came flying out, and after them a troop of nuns, and so another pause, and back in the bushes, and the another 2 girls, I can't remember. Oh yes, no, Micheál was with the others. Anyway, we got them to the hostel, which wasn't a bit down the road, it was miles up the... It meant going over the Gap of Dunlow, which went traffic. Oh, there was no traffic allowed in those days. It was just you could go on horseback, but it was a walking track, and so we got the girls to the hostel, and then, you know, I suppose most of the day had gone, and then a cloud burst and the heavens opened, and never saw rain like it. And somewhere along the way, took a risk, drove, you know, where in a flooded part and water got in the exhaust, and that was it. And then it was dark. I can't remember what month it was, and we could see a light in the distance, which could be anything. And long and short, we got to a farmhouse who put us up for the night, and they were brilliant. And so there were two large bedrooms, and I know Paddy and Noel Austin and Micheál Giles in one, and I shared with Seamus Hughes in the other. And Seamus could not take it, anything. He was just, this was the greatest ordeal that had been inflicted on him. And he, I don't know, did he sleep? I know I did. But in the morning he was looking out that window at the mountain, and that was just bare rock. And I wouldn't like to be ploughing that. And he couldn't see anything of merit in either anyone or anything in Kerry. And, you know, we were having a terrific time. And
The family gave you clothes, they dried you off and gave you clothes
absolutely,
and food. And
yeah. The extraordinary thing, and it would probably be 50 years later. Noel Austin was driving in Kerry, and something rang a bell. He thought, could this be the place where we stayed? I mean, it was an isolated. And farmhouse, well, he must have felt strongly because and right enough it was. And he asked this man if he remembered anything, and he said, well, I do remember, because I can remember coming back and somebody in my clothes, and of course the woman of the house then, we were all soaking when we went, and and I suppose that was again hospitality, that it was the norm in many parts of Ireland. Then you had to give hospitality to the stranger or the visitor, and in dire need in that case. But that was an experience. And we got back to Summerhill, and down to Dangan to drop Seamus off. And again, how trusting people were in the church and in all we were taught. But I remember Kitty Hughes, Seamus's mother, coming out, arms raised, just after all the rosaries. I had Breda and Francie on their knees all night, and he never turned up. And yes, he was supposed to turn up at the end of one of them, but no, we were. But I think that is an experience. I doubt that Seamus ever recovered from that experience of Kerry. So
around about that time there would have been carnivals. The church would have been in need of repair and all of that, and carnivals were run to support that. What are your memories there?
Well, the carnival, well, that was again Ben Holmes, my grandfather's fields, one of his fields on the new road.
Tanglin Road.
No, the new.
Oh, sorry, was it on the new road
it was
first?
On the new road, yeah. And it's actually that field is where Third Age is now, and the doctors,
right.
And the carnival, that was the big event of the year, and yes, it was for church funds or some major work. That and I've forgotten now what, but that was the big event, and there were extras, during Carnival week or fortnight, and one of the things, because I remember going with my mother, and what a daft idea. They had, this is mid-June, and they would show a film, Annie Get Your Gun. So mid-June, brightest evening, white marquee, and you just and everyone on the flat and the screen. So you didn't really see the film. The sound was good, and Mammy liked Harold Keel, so I remember there was a visiting drama group from one of the Dublin drama groups, and in the play, I don't know what the play was, but it's obviously a kitchen, it's a domestic thing. There's one of the characters, she's peeling potatoes and leaving the potatoes on the table, and then another character comes in and he's the tailor, and she had to sit down. And I said, oh, I'll sit here, I'm used to it, on the table. Well, the table was just one of those card. So he sat on it and the whole thing collapsed. And the potatoes went all over the place. And one of the characters got the giggles. And it was an absolute disaster. But everybody remembered the, oh, I sit here, I'm used to sitting on the table. So we had, and then, you had this Sunday afternoon, the afternoon dance with, the costume. Well, certainly they had children's prizes for the best fancy dress.
Fancy dress.
Yeah.
Can you remember any of the organising committee, any of the people who were on the door or anything like that?
I remember Ned Gray. Ned Gray was very nice. His brother,
Paddy?
Pat, yeah. I remember is an absolute pain. Again, somebody who would find reason to object to anything that was suggested. I think the ladies' committee was more prominent. In that they were, they provided refreshments, after any of the things in dining, with the, and that remained the same for many years. You had the two Miss Christies, Kathleen and Bridgie, Phyllis Gogarty, Nancy Nugent, and they're the ones that come to mind. And of course then there was an objection that the committee eat more sandwiches. God, everything was so small-minded. But there was nothing else. Yeah.
Some of the wards were involved as well, right, was there? There were quite a few. I think Daddy was involved at one stage.
Yes, that's right. Mm. Yeah, there was another. You had Joe. Was Joe's name Plunkett?
Okay.
Jimmy Flynn, Eddie Shannon. There was, you had that group. Kelly, of course, the teacher. But I think in those days, the women's committee was more or less a permanent affair. With the men, it was, I hadn't thought of it in that way before, but I never thought of it as a men's committee, but it was all male members but I have a feeling they got together on different occasions.
Times of need.
I don't think there was a permanent. I remember very much when there was the first suggestions that we could use the piece of ground out there where the community centre now. There's that stretch, wasn't there, that I think was vacant. I don't know. Or was the parish property. I don't know. But there was a meeting arranged, and I know Dad made a suggestion of having a clubhouse that purely where somebody could meet, read the paper, or that type of thing. And of course he was put down completely, and the response was that the place for every married man is at home with his wife. And yes, you don't, such a thing is just obsolete. And that of course was an attitude again, because at that time women didn't go to work. the man was the provider, and he worked, and in a decent household, the man gave his wage packet to his wife, and she organised the whole thing. That was the accepted thing, and so very different world from today.
You have a recollection of a certain order or procedure at Mass, where not everyone had access to all the seats.
Oh God! Well, indeed, I mean, when you think back on that, it's so unreal because, yes, there were very definite divisions, sections, and the lowest section didn't go into the church, they were in the porch or outside, all male, that lot. But the higher orders, it was like a fashion parade every Sunday, and the seats, the front row, well, it was more or less a reflection of your social status within the parish. And in the 50s, you know, the status symbol, you know, the fur coats for the top ladies of the parish, and it was like a fashion parade, because Mrs. Dunn, Commandant Dunn's wife, they felt her place was the front row, right, and she would sail up the aisle in her mink, and it really was like a fashion parade. She was inviting everyone, but look at this, it would cost whatever. On the other side of the aisle, Mrs. McGarta in her leopard skin coat, by contrast. You had Mrs. Shannon in her another mink. You had the fur coats. They had to be the top women. You couldn't and you had to be very rich to afford one. And God, and then you had the business of the offerings, and it just seems so appalling now. But the collections